What's up, everybody? It's your boy Josh Burton back again for Everything College Basketball, and it is time to talk about the Big 12 Conference Tournament Preview Show. The Big 12, the last couple years, has been the undeniable best conference in college basketball when you look at the number of top 25 showdowns that would happen on a nightly basis in the league the last few years. It has taken a slight step back this year because the SEC has been so good. But if you look at the Big 12 as a whole, they're still third overall on KenPom in the conference rankings, trailing the Big 10 for second place by just a slight margin in the rating points. The Big 12 this year has been phenomenal. The Houston Cougars win the league again. That's 2 for 2 in Houston since joining the league last year. They finished the conference season with a 19-1 overall record. Second place was Texas Tech. How about the Red Raiders, by the way? Coming up, they were projected in our ECB Preview magazine to be good. I don't think we predicted them to be this good. They finished second in the regular season in the Big 12 Conference with a 15-5 overall record in the league. Behind them, you have a tie for third and fourth between Arizona and BYU, both finished 14-6. Iowa State hit a late season slump. I know that they had injuries with Curtis Jones being out, and it really bothered Iowa State, but they rallied to finish fifth in the league at 13-7. Kansas, 11-9. We're going to talk about the Jayhawks here in a minute. Baylor, 10-10. West Virginia, 10-10. And then everybody else had a losing record in conference play. Now, what makes the Big 12 so good? It is the depth of the league. Even if they're not number one in the KenPom ratings and across America, they still finish with the ECB Top 25 that just came out today as I'm recording on a Monday. You'll be listening to this probably on Tuesday, tomorrow. The Big 12 finishes with 5 teams. That trails only the SEC in number of teams in the top 25. The Big 12 has a dominant team in Houston that is capable of bringing the conference another national championship. They have other really good contenders that we've talked about. And if you look at this conference tournament that we're going to talk about here in just a second, they have a couple teams that desperately need some momentum that could really shock. Kansas City is always good when the Big 12 conference tournament's there. It is always good for some fireworks. Let's go ahead and get into the conference tournament preview for the Big 12, the Phillips 66, shameless plug, Big 12 conference tournament that begins on Tuesday, March 11th. Now, I know if you're watching this right here, the graphic isn't the best. I couldn't get it blown up even more without it messing up the entire graphic. So I will read you these games if you can't see it. And it's Cincinnati, Oklahoma State in a 13-12 matchup, opening things up on Tuesday afternoon. The Bearcats, most consider that they're not necessarily on the bubble as far as being like one of those first 4 or 5 teams out. They're probably in that next tier. You're talking about Cincinnati team, elite defensively, disgusting offense. Finished 7-13 in the league this year. They really did not get many quality, high-level quad 1 victories throughout the course of non-con and in league play. They were just one of those teams because of how good their defense was that always kept them in games for the most part. But man, they can go on some scoring droughts. You're talking about a team that they may not give up 65, but they may also not get 50 themselves depending on the night and the matchup just because they struggle to score the basketball. They finished KenPom with an offensive rating right at 100, a tempo of 288. So it shows you that they play slow. It is a very much grinded out, methodical game. Oklahoma State, on the other hand, 15-16 overall, 7-13 as well in the league. They got some big wins toward the end of the year. They were able to beat Cincinnati in the final regular season game on Saturday. They got a win a few weeks ago against Iowa State at home. They were able to beat an Arizona State team that has some talent. So Oklahoma State, while not being a good team, was able still to knock off some teams and make it where it's, how do I want to put this? Make it where it wasn't a complete embarrassment. Maybe that's a little harsh, but you guys know what I'm saying. In this matchup, you're talking about Oklahoma State, 19th in tempo against what we just talked about, Cincinnati in sub 200. So it's going to be Oklahoma State wants to play fast. Cincinnati wants to grind it out and slow it down. In a matchups like these, I've always said it is much easier to slow a game down than it is to speed one up. As long as Cincinnati can find production and make some shots, whether they can even be layups and putbacks, Cincinnati should be able to hold off Oklahoma State, make them play in the mud, and able to pull out a victory. I've got Cincinnati advancing to Wednesday, where they'll play Iowa State. The next matchup is Colorado and TCU. We talked about TCU a lot this year, especially the last couple of weeks as we got to really ramping up bubble talk. It was not that long ago that they're coming off of a 3-game winning streak, and they had been winners of 5 of the last 6 prior to that, and the beginning to middle part of February, with their only loss got killed by Iowa State. But they had beat Texas Tech, Arizona State, Texas Tech back-to-back, and after the Texas Tech win, you started seeing TCU started popping up on some of the bubble talks where it's a legitimate conversation. They followed it up with back-to-back loss to Cincinnati, West Virginia. They do beat UCF, and then they end the year losing to Baylor and Colorado. They're 16-15 overall, 9-11. The only chance they have to go dancing in the big dance is to win this conference tournament. I clearly do not like their chances, but anything can happen in these conference tournaments. You talk about a Colorado team who has beaten they beat Kansas. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my mind here. No, I'm sorry. They did not beat Kansas. They went on a long losing streak. They played Kansas close 2 games in a row there within a couple weeks apart. 12-19. This has been a really, really down year for Tad Boyle's men. They do not play an exciting brand of basketball. They're good defensively. They're top 60 defensively, but 150 in the offensive rating. They turn the ball over way too much. They are 351st in the nation in turning the basketball over. 21.2% of offensive possessions have ended or led to a turnover. That is clearly not good enough. But they did end the year on a high note. They beat TCU, and it was the Baylor win who I was thinking of from a few weeks ago, not Kansas. They beat Baylor 76-74 at home. So they do have that on the resume. And Baylor is projected to, depending on who you think or look at, they're projected to be in the field or right there on the bubble. So that was their best win of the year for the Colorado Buffaloes. With that being said, TCU's got to win this game. They have to. I think they will, but you never know in tournament play. That would put them against West Virginia next round. We've got Arizona State and, I'm trying to see here. Oh, Kansas State. Sorry, even the graphics throwing me off a little bit. Arizona State, Kansas State. Kansas State, one of the more disappointing teams in college basketball this year. When you talk about the NIL money that they spent, top 5 in NIL money spent, they started off really bad, and especially in league play. They lost, started 1-6 in league play. Their only win coming in the opener against Cincinnati. Non-conference, didn't get a quality win in non-conference. They did play St. John's, Drake, so 2 NCAA tournament teams have a real shot of making runs here potentially, especially the Johnnies. They lost to LSU. They lost to the Liberty team that should be NCAA tournament bound. So not a bad loss in non-con, I guess if you want to count LSU. Conference play, like I said, got off to a 1-6 start. Then they found themselves. Beat West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas, and Arizona. Very quality teams there. Very quality teams. Then they followed up a 4-game losing streak. Then they beat Colorado, Cincinnati. Then they lose final regular season game against Iowa State by 16 points. Kansas State, despite what they've been this year with the NIL and the disappointments and all that, they're 15-16. They're top 40 defensively, and they still have dudes. Doug McDaniels had a good year coming in from Michigan. Coleman Hawkins coming in from Illinois. When he's rolling, he's been good. Brendan Housen has been good when he's rolling. They've got some guys that make you believe that, hey, they're playing in their backyard, essentially, playing there in Kansas City, not too far from the crib. If they can get through this first one, feel good about themselves, knowing that the only chance they got going dancing, similar to TCU, they've got to run the table in this. If they can get by Arizona State, who is banged up and barely has 6 healthy dudes right now on roster, if they get by there, they're going to play Baylor, who we just talked about, who's been struggling. There's a potential for Kansas State to win a couple games, maybe get some momentum, and then anything happens, they can continue to win and move forward. The last game of the first round is UCF and Utah. I don't have a strong opinion on this one because they've both been so up and down. I'm going to take the better seeded team in Utah in this. That sets up Wednesday. Second round action here. I've got Cincinnati and Iowa State. Look, again, Iowa State lost a handful of games there a few weeks ago. We're not a complete unit. Definitely did not look like the team who most of us in ECB and around the nation had a top 5 team for a large part of the year. They're not that anymore, but they do look like they're finally starting to get healthy. And a healthy Iowa State team is that top 5 type of team. They're 6th in defense, 29th in offense on KenPom, 23-8 on the year. They're one of the teams, if you go back to Maui, had Auburn dead to rights in that first game in Maui and blew a 16-point lead. But that's how good they are when they're at their best. They've got a trio of guards, Curtis Jones, Keshawn Gilbert, and Taman Lipsey. Milan Momcilovic, when he's rolling, gives them kind of an outside threat. Bringing a Josh Jefferson in from St. Mary's gives them a legitimate athletic interior presence that goes and crashes the glass, that can face up and do a lot of good things for them. I like Iowa State too deep, shoot the ball too well, and they've got guards who can close the show. They get up big on Cincinnati, and then we talked about the Bearcats do not have the offense to keep up with that. Iowa State moves on to Thursday to the quarterfinals and a matchup with BYU. And the second round game, I have TCU West Virginia. Now, it's a shame that West Virginia, because they've been such a surprise this year, it's a shame that Tucker DeVries has been injured. Because this West Virginia team, 19-12 in their first year under Darian DeVries, they have some really nice wins. They went to Fall Gown Fieldhouse earlier in the year and beat Kansas. They beat Arizona in a non-conference game, despite being conference opponents this year, because of the way the schedule worked out there in the battle for Atlantis. They beat Arizona. They played Louisville to an overtime game. They beat Gonzaga. They've beaten Iowa State at home in West Virginia. They've got some good wins under their belt. And they've got a player of the year contender in the league in Javon Small. They also get good production from Amani Hansberry. Joseph Yesufu, the former Kansas player or Kansas guy, comes off the bench, plays decent. He's kind of hot and cold, but he gives them some minutes. He's been starting here lately. Eduardo Andre in that game against Kansas and the one that they won. You're talking about a 6'11 dude, 240-pound senior that doesn't show up a lot on the stat sheet, but just gives them a physical presence. I really like this West Virginia team. It's a shame, like I said, that Tucker DeVries got injured early on and couldn't be a contributing factor. You're probably talking about West Virginia being a much higher seed. I'm taking West Virginia to stifle TCU. They've got the best player on the floor in Javon Small. There's any given night he can go for 35. I think he has a big game, West Virginia. Then we're talking about Baylor, Kansas State, as I mentioned. This one's very dicey because Baylor, again, on the bubble in a lot of ways. Most people have them safely in because of the metrics. They're 18-13. They've got an incredible win that looks even better now back earlier in the year against St. John's on 2 overtimes, a game that St. John's controlled for large portions, and then Baylor comes back and wins it and basically steals it late. That looks so incredible, and it's probably saving their resume right now. The Arkansas win looks better now that happened in the game 2 of the year, or in game 2 of the season, with Arkansas looking like an NCAA tournament team finally, and the Kansas win. But man, Baylor, they're so hot and cold right now, and a loss here early, I think could really, I don't think it knocks them out of the tournament. That does give them 14 losses though. I think it could knock them into Dayton first 4 territory. They've got to win this one against Kansas State. But again, I like Kansas State's versatility when Doug McDaniel's playing well. Little guard that can get up and down the floor. If you get good, Coleman Hawkins could get you a triple-double on any night. Baylor's guards are so hot and cold. They're not what we thought they were. I've got Kansas State taking down Baylor and making Baylor really sweat it a little bit on Selection Sunday. Again, I think they're ultimately in the NCAA tournament with 14 losses, but I think that could really drop them to Dayton, and they have to play a play-in game, which is unusual for Baylor and Scott Drew in these modern times. You always think of Baylor as a highly ranked team with potential going to the Final Four. The last matchup of the quarterfinal, the Kansas Jayhawks against the Utah Utes, right there in Kansas City. I don't think anybody, for momentum's sake, needs a run in their backyard more than the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas's issues last year that saw them get waxed by Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament persisted this year when they were our preseason number 1 team. They end the last couple of weeks of the ECB Top 25 not ranked because they would win a game, lose a game. Then they lose 2 in a row out to the Utah teams. They lost to Utah. They lost to BYU. They lost 3 games this year at home, but they did finish the senior night in the regular season with a big win over Arizona. You got good Hunter Dickinson that gave them 33 points. They need Hunter Dickinson to be good, and they need their guards like Zeke Mayo. They need somebody else like a David Coit to finally step up. He's had a couple okay games this year, but it's really been, if anything goes, it's Zeke Mayo going out and shooting the ball for him. They can't shoot. Kansas, on averages, they don't shoot the ball well. They're 34.3% from the year, but I think in big moments, they're something like 28%. I can't swear by that, but it's what it feels like. They're 8th defensively, so they do defend well. But, man, they've been so hot and cold for anybody who's followed this team all year long, and it feels like the same struggles as last year where this team cannot consistently shoot. They need a big run for nothing more than confidence sake. I've got Kansas beating Utah, but we will see how they progress through this tournament because they absolutely need it. And you know one thing, Jayhawk fans will turn up in Kansas City for their Jayhawks. Takes us to quarterfinal action. You've got BYU going against Iowa State in a great game. Top 25 ranked in the ECB's final poll of the year here. What a great matchup. BYU, one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Richie Saunders is playing at an all-conference level. Igor Demon is a lottery pick as of right now. You're talking about 6'9" point forward that can really, really make some plays out there. Richie Saunders has been just doing everything, shooting the ball, getting offensive rebounds, defending. Cannon Catchings has been up and down as a freshman, but a lot of talent there. Dallin Hall. There is a lot to like about this BYU team. Shoot the 3 ball well. They shoot inside well. They're 12th in offense. I think them and Iowa State, if you look the first 2 matchups, they just beat Iowa State last week in double overtime thriller in a game where Iowa State trailed big, came back, and then forced double overtime, and BYU makes plays late. They've got wins over Arizona. They've got wins over Kansas. This is a really good BYU team. Really good. They've won 8 in a row heading into this tournament. 24th in KenPom, 23-8. I've got BYU continuing this momentum. I think versatility-wise and teams that come in with momentum tend to roll through that momentum, at least through conference tournaments. Not always, but at least through conference tournaments. Get to the NCAA tournament and keep that momentum, completely different story. But give me BYU over Iowa State to move to semifinal Friday. The next quarterfinal we will talk about is West by God, Virginia, and the Houston Cougars. Look, Houston's a machine. You have to drive a stake through their heart in order to beat them. They're great defensively like Kelvin Sampson teams. They've got a good offense this year, which has always been my hang-up on them. They've got dudes who can make shots. They don't take a bunch of threes, but they make a high percentage of the ones that they've made. And they've got a guy in Milos Uzan who started slow, trying to fit into the Houston culture, but he has figured his way out through conference play, and he has been amazing for Houston. I think as much as I love Javon Small, I think Houston will suffocate them. Javon Small may get his, but nobody else in West Virginia gets theirs. Houston moves to the semifinal matchup against BYU on Friday. Down on the bottom part of the bracket in the quarterfinals, we got Texas Tech, and in my bracket, Kansas State. I think this is where K-State's run ends. I do think they give a good accounting for themselves. Texas Tech has been awesome this year. JT Toppin could be the conference player of the year by the time this video drops. Texas Tech, 24 wins, 7th in offense, 27th in defense. They play a slower tempo, but man, they really get after you. JT Toppin, we talked a lot about him as a freshman last year, playing for New Mexico, has tournament experience. If you remember, New Mexico won the Mountain West Tournament Championship last year. He's a dude who is already, as a sophomore, had plenty of experience. Texas Tech is the top 10 team in the nation. Darian Williams has been really good. Elijah Hawkins at guard. Chance McMillan just making plays. Christian Anderson. This team is loaded. They are really good, and you will have to outfight Texas Tech to get a win. And I don't think that Kansas State, I think the wear and tear, the having to play a couple days in a row, then playing Texas Tech, I think this is where they get some. Texas Tech moves on. Then the last game of the quarterfinal round, we've got Kansas, Arizona, and a rematch from last Saturday, this time on a neutral floor. But again, Kansas will have the overwhelming fan support in this game. Jayhawks run it back. I'll keep it short and sweet. They'll go back to the same game plan. You get good, motivated Hunter Dickinson. He may not go for 33, but I can see a double-double. They get Zeke Mayo for right around 20 again, and I think they just wear down Arizona to move to a semifinal matchup. Semifinals, BYU, Houston. BYU, everything I talked about, the way they shoot, they've got a lottery pick in Igor Dimon, but it's Houston, and they just make good teams look average. I think they will suffocate BYU and to play physical with them. And a team like BYU, they will try to fight, but they do not want physicality. They want pretty ball games. Houston will muck it up. Houston to the finals. And then Kansas, Texas Tech. Talking about momentum and riding momentum. What a win here for Kansas would do. But I think the run in the Big 12 tournament ends in the semifinals because Texas Tech is that damn good. Give me Texas Tech. Give me Houston. This is the rubber match. They each won on the other's home floor. Texas Tech beat Houston in their only home loss in conference play this year by 1 point, 82-81, back earlier in the year. And a few weeks ago, Houston went and repaid the favor in Lubbock, beating Texas Tech. I think this will be a physical matchup. These games have been very, very close, both matchups. But I think at the end of the day, Texas Tech's ability to use JT Toppin, not only is kind of a traditional, he's not really a traditional post at all. He's more of a stretch, but he doesn't step out and shoot a ton of threes. In fact, he's only shot 45 on the year. But his face-up game could cause Houston some problems. If the way to beat Houston is take them off, if you can take them off the bounce, get to the rim, and then spray out to shooters, I think they can work JT Toppin to their advantage. And then you need guys like Elijah Hawkins, Chance McMillan, Christian Anderson. The last two guys, McMillan and Anderson, both shooting over 40% from three. As long as they don't get in foul trouble and they don't fall behind big early, because Houston's the last team in the world that you want to fall behind 8, 10, 12 points to, because it's damn near impossible to come back. If Texas Tech can either jump them early or just play even with them and then find a late run, I think Texas Tech can win this game. But if you notice, I keep saying if, that's too many ifs. Houston's the real deal. The Cougars win the Phillips 66 Big 12 championship for the year 2025. They're that good. They're going to be a 1 seed, and they're going to be hard to beat come March Madness.